A quiet drive turns perilous. The late afternoon sun painted the sky in hues of orange and gold, casting its warm light over the sleepy countryside of eastern Texas. Brianna Harris, a young, expectant mother, adjusted her seatbelt as she maneuvered her aging sedan along the winding road. She had just left her aunt's house in Beaumont, where a family gathering had stretched far longer than she had planned. Though the chatter and laughter of her relatives still echoed in her mind, Brianna felt an urgent need to get home. At 7 months pregnant, the comfort of her own bed was calling. The road ahead stretched over a narrow bridge that spanned a lazy creek. Brianna glanced at her dashboard, frowning as the temperature gauge flickered ominously. Her car, a dependable but well-worn sedan she affectionately called Old Faithful, had been her companion for years. It had its quirks, but today it seemed to be protesting the journey. As the bridge loomed closer, her engine gave a stuttering groan. She instinctively pressed the accelerator, but the car lurched forward only to shudder violently before the engine died. Coasting to a stop on the bridge, Brianna's stomach dropped. The bridge, flanked by rusted steel railings, offered no shoulder. Her car was now an immovable obstacle on the narrow 2-lane road. Brianna reached for her phone, hoping to call her husband, Marcus. However, as she glanced at the screen, her heart sank. No signal. She muttered a frustrated prayer under her breath, her fingers trembling as she pressed the power button repeatedly. The digital icon mocked her with its unwavering lack of bars. The sound of distant engines broke her moment of despair. She peered into the rearview mirror, her breath catching as a group of motorcycles rounded the bend in the road behind her. The riders, clad in black leather, formed a tight formation, their presence unmistakable against the fading daylight. The low rumble of their engines grew louder, reverberating through the stillness of the evening. Panic surged in Brianna's chest. She locked her car doors instinctively, her mind racing through every cautionary tale she had ever heard. What did these bikers want? Were they just passing through, or did they have other intentions? The motorcycles slowed as they approached her stranded car, their riders dismounting one by one. Brianna counted 6 in total, their silhouettes intimidating as they moved toward her. The leader, a tall man with broad shoulders and a dark helmet that obscured his face, stepped forward. His posture was confident, his strides measured. Behind him, the others waited silently, their presence an imposing wall of leather and chrome. Brianna clutched her belly protectively, her other hand hovering over the lock button. The man stopped a few feet from her driver's side window, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. When he spoke, his voice was deep but calm. "Ma'am," he began, "looks like you've got some car trouble. Mind if we take a look?" Brianna's instincts screamed at her to refuse, but the sincerity in his tone gave her pause. She studied his body language, searching for any sign of hostility, but found none. His hands remained visible, his movements deliberate, her heart still pounding. She rolled the window down just enough to speak. "My car, it won't start," she admitted, her voice trembling. "And my phone doesn't have any signal." The man nodded, glancing at the hood of her car. "Pop it open. We'll see what we can do." Brianna hesitated, torn between fear and the glimmer of hope that he might genuinely want to help. Finally, she reached for the latch and released it, the hood creaking as it sprang up. The man signaled to one of his companions, a shorter biker with a tool belt slung over his shoulder. As they examined the engine, Brianna kept a wary eye on the others, who remained by their motorcycles, chatting quietly. The lead biker occasionally glanced back at her, his helmet tilted just enough to reveal his sharp, calculating eyes. "Battery's dead," the man announced after a few minutes. "We'll need to jump it, but first, we've got to move you to the side. This bridge isn't safe." Brianna looked at the narrow confines of the bridge, the drop to the creek below, and the gathering dusk. It hadn't escaped her that they were completely alone out here. Her voice faltered as she asked, How will you move it?" The biker gestured toward his group. "We'll push it to the shoulder. You just steer." "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Brianna's anxiety bubbled over. She looked at the darkening horizon, then back at the man. "You trust us for 5 minutes, and you'll be back on the road," he said firmly. Reluctantly, Brianna shifted the car into neutral and released the parking brake. The bikers surrounded the car, their boots scuffing against the pavement as they heaved it forward. The car rolled smoothly to the edge of the bridge, where they carefully angled it onto a patch of gravel just wide enough for her to park safely. The lead biker returned to her window. "Stay put," he instructed. "We'll get the cables." As he turned to fetch the jumper cables, another noise cut through the fading roar of the motorcycles, a distant horn. Brianna glanced in her rearview mirror to see a truck speeding toward them. Its driver leaned out of the window, yelling something unintelligible as he honked again. The truck screeched to a halt just a few feet from the group, its driver, a burly man in a red cap, jumping out. "What's all this?" the man demanded, his voice booming. He looked at Brianna, then at the bikers. "You messing with her?" Brianna's throat tightened, her voice caught in her chest. The lead biker turned to face the newcomer, his posture calm but firm. "We're helping her," he said simply. "Her car broke down." The truck driver's eyes narrowed, his suspicion evident. "Helping her? You? Dressed like that? Forgive me if I don't buy it." The biker tilted his head, his tone unwavering. "You see something wrong with helping someone in need." The tension in the air thickened as the two men squared off. Brianna's heart raced as she gripped the steering wheel, praying silently that the situation wouldn't escalate. Finally, the truck driver threw up his hands in exasperation. "Fine," he muttered. "Do what you want, but I'm watching you." With that, he retreated to his truck, leaning against it as the bikers resumed their work. The lead biker glanced at Brianna, giving her a reassuring nod before connecting the jumper cables. Moments later, the car roared to life, its engine sputtering but holding steady. "You're good to go," the biker told her, shutting the hood with a solid thud. "But that battery won't last long. Get it replaced as soon as you can." Brianna stared at him, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you. I don't even know how to." "Don't worry about it," he interrupted. Then, with a faint smile, he added, "Just don't believe everything you hear about guys like us." As the group mounted their bikes and rode off into the dusk, Brianna sat in her car stunned. The day had taken a turn she never could have anticipated, leaving her with a renewed sense of gratitude and curiosity about the mysterious bikers who had come to her rescue. A token left behind. Brianna drove cautiously down the winding road, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly as her mind replayed the surreal encounter. The sun had dipped below the horizon, and the faint hum of her car's engine was the only sound accompanying her thoughts. She couldn't shake the lingering adrenaline from her system. The vivid image of the bikers still itched in her memory. Against all her preconceived notions, they had been nothing but helpful, a stark contrast to the fear she had felt when they first appeared. Her home was still several miles away, but she needed a moment to gather herself. Pulling onto the gravel shoulder of a quiet country lane, Brianna turned off the car and leaned back against the seat. The sound of cicadas filled the night air as she closed her eyes and tried to calm her racing heart. When she opened her eyes, her gaze fell on something resting on the passenger seat, something that hadn't been there before. It was a small, neatly folded patch of fabric, black with intricate white stitching. Picking it up, Brianna examined the design. A winged skull with the words "Road Guardians" embroidered in bold letters beneath it. Her first instinct was confusion. Had one of the bikers left it in her car? If so, why? Was it a mistake, or did it mean something? As she ran her fingers over the stitching, a strange sense of calm washed over her. The patch felt like a token, a memento of their unexpected kindness. Curiosity sparked within her. She pulled out her phone, relieved to see a faint signal returning as she neared the outskirts of her small town. A quick search revealed more than she expected. The Road Guardians were a national organization of motorcyclists who prided themselves on acts of service. Their mission was simple: to assist stranded motorists, provide aid during disasters, and support communities in need. Their motto, "Ride to Protect," resonated deeply as she read the testimonials of others who had encountered them. One story stood out: a single mother stranded on a highway in the middle of a snowstorm. A group of road guardians had not only helped her get her car running, but also followed her home to ensure her safety. Another account detailed how they had raised funds for a local family who had lost everything in a fire. Brianna's heart softened as she realized the full weight of what had just happened to her. The bikers hadn't been an accident of fate. They were part of something bigger, something profoundly human. They didn't do it for recognition or reward. They did it because it was the right thing to do. But why had they left the patch? Did it symbolize something more? A knock at the door. As she pulled into her driveway, the warm glow of the porch light greeted her. Marcus, her husband, stood at the door, his silhouette a comforting sight after the whirlwind of emotions she had just experienced. Brianna parked the car and stepped out slowly, still clutching the patch. Marcus met her halfway, concern etched across his face. "You're late," he said, wrapping her in a gentle embrace. "What happened?" Brianna melted into his arms, the warmth of his presence grounding her. "You won't believe it," she began, recounting the events on the bridge. She told him about the bikers, the truck driver, and the unexpected kindness that had left her speechless. When she showed him the patch, Marcus furrowed his brow, taking it in his hands. "Road Guardians," he read aloud. "Sounds like they're more than just a biker gang. They left this for you." "I think so," Brianna said, her voice tinged with both awe and curiosity. "It feels like a reminder that good people still exist." Marcus smiled softly. "Seems like they're doing what most people wouldn't. You should hold on to this. It's a reminder that not everyone judges by appearances." Brianna nodded, a lump forming in her throat. She was about to respond when a sudden knock at the door startled them both. Marcus turned toward the sound, his body instinctively shielding hers as he approached cautiously. Opening the door, Marcus was met with an unexpected sight. Standing under the porch light was the lead biker from earlier. Without his helmet, he looked less intimidating and more human. His rugged features carried an air of quiet confidence, his dark eyes steady and calm. In his hands was a small envelope. "Evening," the man said, his voice low and steady. "Sorry to bother you folks, but I wanted to make sure you got home safe." Marcus glanced back at Brianna, who had frozen in the doorway, the patch still clutched tightly in her hand. Taking a step forward, she met the biker's gaze, her voice soft but steady. "We made it home, thanks to you." The man nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Good. That bridge can be dangerous, especially after dark." Brianna hesitated before holding up the patch. "You left this, didn't you?" The biker's smile widened slightly. "We always leave one behind when we help someone. It's our way of saying, you're not alone." Her voice wavered as she asked, "Why do you do it? Why go out of your way for someone you don't know?" He leaned against the porch railing, his expression thoughtful. "Because someone once did it for me," he said simply. "Years ago, I was stranded on the side of the road with nothing but a broken-down bike and a bad attitude. A stranger stopped and helped me, no questions asked. Before he left, he said, 'When it's your turn, pay it forward.' So that's what I do." Brianna felt her chest tighten with emotion, her earlier fear replaced by a deep respect for the man standing before her. His sincerity was undeniable, and his story struck a chord she hadn't expected. "What's your name?" she asked, her voice steadier now. "Ely," he replied, extending a hand. "And if you ever find yourself in trouble again, just look us up. The road guardians aren't too hard to find." Brianna shook his hand, her gratitude evident. "Thank you, Eli, for everything." With a nod, Eli handed her the envelope. "One more thing. There's a number in here. If you ever need help, don't hesitate to call." As Eli turned and walked back to his motorcycle, the rumble of its engine filled the night air once more. Brianna and Marcus stood on the porch, watching as he rode off into the darkness. Brianna looked down at the envelope, her fingers trembling as she opened it. Inside was a handwritten note. "Kindness is contagious. Pass it on." Tears welled in her eyes as she clutched the note and the patch to her chest. In a world often marked by division and mistrust, she had stumbled upon a group of strangers who reminded her of the power of compassion. The road guardians had left her with more than just a running car. They had left her with hope, a deeper connection. The morning after her encounter with the road guardians, Brianna couldn't shake the events of the previous day. The patch and the handwritten note sat on the kitchen table, where she had placed them after breakfast. They felt like more than mementos. They were symbols of an encounter that had both challenged and reaffirmed her perception of humanity. Marcus entered the kitchen, his steaming coffee mug in hand. "Still thinking about it?" he asked, gesturing toward the patch. Brianna nodded, her fingers tracing the edges of the fabric. "I can't stop. I've never experienced anything like that before. It's not just what they did, it's why they did it. It's rare to meet people who help without expecting anything in return." Marcus leaned against the counter, sipping his coffee thoughtfully. "You said their motto was Ride to Protect, right? Sounds like they're more than just good Samaritans. Maybe there's a bigger story behind them." Brianna glanced at her phone. She had briefly read about the road guardians the night before, but her curiosity wasn't satisfied. "I think I need to know more," she admitted. "Not just about them, but why they do what they do." Marcus smiled. "You've got time today. Do a little digging. Who knows? Maybe it'll answer some of those questions swirling around in your head." Discovering the road guardians. After Marcus left for work, Brianna settled onto the couch with her laptop. She began her search with the basics, finding the official website for the road guardians. The homepage featured striking images of bikers assisting stranded motorists, volunteering at food drives, and even escorting funerals for fallen service members. Their mission was clear: to protect, serve, and foster a sense of community. One section of the site caught her attention: Our Story. Clicking on it, Brianna was taken to a page detailing the origins of the road guardians. The group had been founded decades ago by a Vietnam veteran named Hank "Iron Mike" Morrison. According to the page, Mike had returned from the war struggling to adjust to civilian life. On a lonely highway one night, his motorcycle broke down, leaving him stranded. A truck driver had stopped to help, offering not just mechanical assistance, but a heartfelt conversation that changed Mike's outlook on humanity. Inspired by that encounter, Mike vowed to spend his life paying it forward. He began gathering like-minded riders, and over the years, the Road Guardians grew into a national organization dedicated to acts of kindness. Brianna felt a lump in her throat as she read testimonials from people who had been helped by the group. One story, in particular, resonated with her: a young woman stranded on the side of a snowy mountain road. The Guardians had not only fixed her car, but also provided food and blankets while waiting for safer driving conditions. She clicked through more pages, learning about their charity initiatives, disaster relief efforts, and community outreach programs. The more she read, the more impressed she became. This wasn't just a group of bikers doing good deeds. It was a movement rooted in compassion, solidarity, and a commitment to changing lives. But there was one question Brianna couldn't shake. Why had Eli chosen to come back and check on her? She wasn't ungrateful, far from it, but his personal follow-up felt unusual compared to the stories she had read. Was there more to their encounter than she realized? A surprising discovery. As Brianna delved deeper, she stumbled upon a section of the site dedicated to regional chapters. Clicking on the Texas chapter, she found a list of names and photos of local members. Her breath caught as she recognized Eli's face among them. The caption beneath his photo read, "Eli Carter, Chapter Leader." Brianna blinked at the screen, surprised by how much the simple title revealed. Eli wasn't just a member of the Road Guardians. He was a leader, responsible for organizing and overseeing their efforts in her area. She clicked on his profile, which detailed his journey from a troubled youth to a respected figure in the community. He had joined the Guardians after a stranger saved him from a dangerous situation, dedicating his life to continuing that legacy. What stood out most was a quote from Eli: "Every road has its challenges, but no one should face them alone." The words resonated deeply with Brianna. She realized that Eli's actions on the bridge weren't just about fixing her car. They were about ensuring she felt safe, seen, and cared for in a moment of vulnerability. The patch and note weren't mere tokens. They were invitations to carry forward the kindness she had received. The unexpected visit. Brianna was still lost in thought when the sound of a motorcycle engine broke through the quiet of the afternoon. She peered out the window, her heart skipping a beat as Eli's bike came into view. He parked at the curb, dismounted, and removed his helmet, glancing toward her house. For a moment, Brianna hesitated. What was he doing here again? Was something wrong? She quickly smoothed her hair and opened the front door, stepping onto the porch as Eli approached. "Hope I'm not intruding," he said, his tone warm but reserved. "Not at all," Brianna replied, her curiosity outweighing her surprise. "Is everything okay?" Eli nodded, holding up a small box. "I realized after I left last night that I never properly introduced myself or explained the patch. Figured I'd drop this off too. Just a little something to say thanks for trusting us." Brianna accepted the box, her fingers brushing against the smooth cardboard. Inside, she found a keychain with the same winged skull logo, along with a handwritten note. "Keep riding forward. You're stronger than you think." She looked up at Eli, her voice catching. "You didn't have to do this." Eli shrugged, his gaze steady. "You didn't have to trust us either. It goes both ways." For a moment, silence hung between them, the weight of unspoken gratitude filling the air. Finally, Brianna spoke. "I looked you up. Your group, I mean. The Road Guardians. I read about what you do, why you do it. It's incredible." Eli smiled faintly. "It's not just about us. It's about people like you, too. Every time we help someone, we hope they'll carry it forward in their own way. That's how we make the world a little better, one road at a time." Brianna felt tears prick her eyes. "You've already done that for me," she said softly. "I don't know how I'll ever repay it, but I promise I'll try." Eli's expression softened. "You don't owe us anything, Brianna. Just take care of yourself and that little one you're carrying. That's more than enough." As Eli turned to leave, Brianna felt a surge of determination. She wasn't just going to carry forward the kindness she had received. She was going to make it a part of her life. Watching him ride off, she realized that sometimes the most profound connections are born from the most unexpected encounters. Brianna glanced down at the keychain in her hand. It wasn't just a keepsake. It was a reminder of her own strength and the goodness that still existed in the world. As she stepped back inside, she made a silent vow to honor the spirit of the Road Guardians, starting with her own community. The ripple effect. The next few days brought a strange but welcome sense of clarity for Brianna. Her encounter with the Road Guardians had sparked something inside her. A drive to not only understand the kindness she had received, but also to act on it. She couldn't shake the feeling that her experience was a call to action, a push to create ripples of positivity in her own way. On a crisp Saturday morning, Brianna sat at her kitchen table, the patch and keychain in front of her. She had been staring at them for nearly an hour, trying to figure out where to begin. Finally, she picked up her phone and dialed the number from the note Eli had given her. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "This is Eli," he said. Brianna hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Hi, Eli. It's Brianna, from the bridge." There was a brief pause, then a warm chuckle. "Hey, Brianna. How's the car holding up?" "It's running, for now," she replied, smiling despite herself. "I just wanted to say thank you again. And I wanted to ask you something, if that's okay." "Of course," Eli said. "What's on your mind?" Taking a deep breath, Brianna launched into her idea. "I've been thinking about what you said. That kindness is something we pass on. I want to do something like that, but I don't know where to start. Do you think the road guardians could help me figure it out? Eli's tone softened. You want to pay it forward? Yes, Brianna said firmly. I want to help people the way you helped me. There was a pause on the other end. Then Eli spoke. Brianna, you just made my day. Let me make a few calls. If you're serious about this, we can show you how. A meeting with the guardians. The following weekend, Brianna found herself standing in a community center parking lot, her nerves tingling with anticipation. Rows of motorcycles gleamed in the morning sun, their polished chrome reflecting the vibrant chatter of their owners. Despite her initial anxiety, the atmosphere was welcoming, even familial. Eli greeted her with a wide smile as he stepped away from his bike. He wasn't wearing his usual leather jacket today. Instead, he sported a simple black t-shirt with the Road Guardians logo emblazoned across the chest. Glad you could make it, he said, extending a hand. You ready to meet the crew? Brianna nodded, clutching her tote bag like a lifeline. As ready as I'll ever be. Eli led her toward a group of bikers who were gathered around a folding table covered in supplies, water bottles, snacks, and first aid kits. One by one, he introduced her to the team. Maria, a former EMT with a knack for fixing just about anything. Troy, a retired firefighter who now organized charity events. And Jasmine, a spirited young woman who had joined the group after they helped her during a flood. These are the people who keep us running, Eli said. We're not just about fixing cars. We're about building connections. Jasmine stepped forward, her bright smile immediately putting Brianna at ease. So, you're the one Eli's been talking about, she said. Welcome to the family. Brianna blinked in surprise. Family. Jasmine laughed. That's what we are. Once you're part of this, you're never alone. The sincerity in her voice struck a chord with Brianna. For the first time in days, she felt like she belonged. A mission in action. The morning passed quickly as Brianna observed the Guardians in action. They were preparing for a community outreach event in a nearby town that had been hit by recent flooding. The plan was to distribute supplies, assist with cleanup efforts, and check on elderly residents who might need help. Brianna joined Maria in sorting donations, her hands moving quickly as they organized boxes of canned goods and toiletries. As they worked, Maria shared stories of past missions, everything from rebuilding homes after hurricanes to mentoring at-risk youth. What made you join the Guardians? Brianna asked, curious about Maria's journey. Maria paused, a thoughtful expression crossing her face. I lost someone close to me a few years ago, she said quietly. Helping others became my way of healing. When I found the Guardians, I realized I wasn't just helping others. I was helping myself. Her words resonated deeply with Brianna, who often felt overwhelmed by the challenges of impending motherhood. Perhaps this was what she needed too, a purpose beyond her fears. When it was time to leave for the outreach, Eli handed Brianna a reflective vest. You're riding with me, he said. Brianna hesitated, glancing at the sleek motorcycle. I've never been on one of these before. Eli grinned. First time for everything. Don't worry. I'll take it slow. With a mix of excitement and apprehension, Brianna climbed onto the bike behind Eli, gripping his shoulders as the engine roared to life. The ride was exhilarating, the wind whipping past her face as they sped down the open road. For the first time in days, she felt free. Free from worry. Free from doubt. When they arrived at the flood-stricken town, the scene was sobering. Streets were lined with debris, and the air carried a faint smell of mildew. Residents moved about with weary determination, their faces etched with exhaustion. The Guardians wasted no time. Maria and Troy began distributing supplies, while Jasmine organized a group to clear fallen branches and trash from the streets. Eli led a team to check on an elderly couple whose home had been partially submerged. Brianna found herself paired with Jasmine, helping a young mother salvage belongings from her water-damaged home. As they worked, the woman shared her story, a tale of resilience in the face of hardship. Brianna listened intently, her own struggles feeling small in comparison. By the end of the day, the town looked noticeably better. More importantly, the residents' spirits seemed to have lifted. As the guardians packed up to leave, a little girl ran up to Brianna and handed her a wilted flower. "Thank you," the girl said, her voice soft but sincere. Brianna's eyes filled with tears as she accepted the flower. "You're welcome," she whispered. "A new beginning." That night, as Brianna sat on her porch reflecting on the day, she realized how much she had gained. The guardians hadn't just helped her. They had given her a new perspective on life. She was no longer content to be a passive observer. She wanted to be a force for good, just like them. The patch and keychain now felt like badges of honor, symbols of the journey she had begun. As the stars twinkled above, Brianna made a silent vow. She would carry forward the spirit of the road guardians, creating ripples of kindness wherever she could. In her heart, she knew this was only the beginning. Kindness rekindled. The following week, Brianna woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. Her experience with the road guardians had shifted something deep within her. It wasn't just about being helped, it was about discovering the strength and compassion she could offer in return. She wanted to do more, but the path ahead felt daunting. Where could she start? She sat at the dining table, staring at the patch and the keychain that had become her touchstones. Her phone buzzed with a message from Eli. "Good morning, Brianna. Thought you might want to know we're planning another outreach event this weekend. You in?" Her response was immediate. "Absolutely. Tell me where and when." But as she hit send, a thought struck her. Why wait for the weekend? There were opportunities to help all around her, right here in her own community. Brianna's first step. Later that day, Brianna took a walk through her neighborhood. The streets were familiar, yet today they seemed different, full of potential. She noticed an elderly man struggling to carry groceries to his front door. Without hesitation, she approached him. "Can I help you with that?" she asked, smiling. The man hesitated, his eyes narrowing in suspicion before softening. "If you don't mind," he said, handing her a heavy bag. As she carried the groceries inside, she learned his name was Mr. Dunlop, a widower who had lived in the neighborhood for decades. His gratitude was genuine, and their brief conversation ended with him inviting her to visit any time she needed fresh vegetables from his garden. It was a small act, but it sparked something inside Brianna. Kindness didn't have to be grandiose. It could be as simple as lending a hand. Spreading the spirit. Encouraged by the encounter, Brianna decided to go further. She started by organizing a community cleanup. Using social media and word of mouth, she invited neighbors to gather at the local park, which had fallen into neglect. To her surprise, a dozen people showed up, including families, teenagers, and even Mr. Dunlop. As they worked together to pick up trash, paint benches, and plant flowers, Brianna felt a sense of camaraderie she hadn't experienced before. It wasn't just about improving the park, it was about bringing people together. One of the volunteers, a young woman named Camille, approached Brianna during a break. "I've lived here for years, but I've never seen the neighborhood come together like this." Camille said, "What made you organize this?" Brianna hesitated, then smiled. "I was inspired by some people who helped me when I needed it most. They reminded me that we're stronger when we support each other." Camille nodded thoughtfully. "Well, it's working. Let me know if you ever need help with something like this again." By the end of the day, the park looked transformed, but the real victory was the connections Brianna had fostered. She realized that her small efforts could ripple outward, touching lives in ways she couldn't always see. The Guardians' return. When the weekend arrived, Brianna joined the Road Guardians for another outreach event, this time at a local homeless shelter. The group had partnered with a nearby motorcycle dealership to host a food drive and provide warm clothing to those in need. Brianna worked alongside Jasmine, sorting donations and greeting shelter residents with a genuine smile. The energy in the room was electric, people laughing, sharing stories, and coming together despite their struggles. At one point, Brianna noticed a young boy sitting alone near the edge of the room. He looked no older than 10, his clothes worn and his eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and uncertainty. She approached him gently, kneeling to meet his gaze. "Hi there," she said softly. "What's your name?" "Micah," he replied, his voice barely audible. "Nice to meet you, Micah. I'm Brianna. Are you here with your family?" He nodded, pointing toward a woman sorting through donated clothes. "That's my mom." Brianna smiled. "It's a big day, huh? You want to help me with something?" Micah's eyes lit up with cautious excitement. "What?" "I'm setting up a table for the kids," Brianna explained. "We've got coloring books and snacks, but I could use some help making it look awesome." Micah hesitated before nodding, a small smile creeping onto his face. Together, they arranged the table, and soon other children joined in, their laughter filling the room. Watching them, Brianna felt a swell of pride. This was what it was all about, creating moments of joy and connection. An unexpected visitor. As the event wound down, Brianna spotted Eli across the room, talking with the shelter director. He caught her eye and walked over, a proud smile on his face. "You've got a knack for this," he said, gesturing toward the kids' table. Brianna laughed. "I'm just following your example." Eli shook his head. "No, you're making it your own. That's what makes it special." Before Brianna could respond, a voice interrupted them. "Excuse me, are you Brianna?" She turned to see a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. "Yes, that's me," Brianna replied, puzzled. The woman extended a hand. "I'm Karen, the director here. Eli told me about what you've been doing in your neighborhood, the cleanup, helping your neighbors. I just wanted to say thank you. People like you make all the difference." Brianna felt her cheeks flush with both pride and humility. "I'm just trying to give back," she said. "It's the least I can do." Karen nodded. "Well, if you're interested, we could always use volunteers here. You've got a way with people." The idea thrilled Brianna. "I'd love to. Thank you." A new chapter. That evening, as Brianna drove home, she reflected on how much her life had changed in such a short time. The woman who had once been paralyzed by fear and doubt was now filled with purpose. Her encounter with the road guardians had been the catalyst, but the journey was her own. When she pulled into her driveway, she noticed a group of kids playing basketball at the park she had helped clean up. Their laughter was a reminder of how even small acts could leave lasting impacts. Brianna knew she wasn't done. There were still roads to travel, bridges to build, and lives to touch. As she stepped into her home, she glanced at the patch on her table one more time. It wasn't just a symbol, it was a promise. Her journey was just beginning. And this time, she wasn't alone. The power of paying it forward. The morning sun filtered through Brianna's curtains as she woke to the sound of her phone buzzing. She reached for it, her heart skipping a beat when she saw the caller ID. Eli. It wasn't unusual for him to check in now and then, but his calls always seemed to carry an air of significance. "Good morning, Eli," she said, her voice still groggy. "Morning, Brianna," Eli replied. "I know it's short notice, but we got something big planned today. Thought you might want to be part of it." Brianna sat up, curiosity instantly replacing her grogginess. "What's going on?" "We're hosting a charity ride to raise money for a family that lost everything in a house fire," Eli explained. "It's more than just riding, though. There's a whole community event afterward. Food, music, donations. It's going to be something special." Brianna didn't hesitate. "Count me in." "What time and where?" Eli chuckled. "Knew I could count on you. Meet us at the town square at 10. Bring that big heart of yours." The charity ride. By mid-morning, Brianna found herself surrounded by the familiar roar of motorcycles and the vibrant energy of the road guardians. The town square was alive with activity. Dozens of bikers preparing for the ride, volunteers setting up booths, and locals gathering to support the cause. Eli greeted her with a grin. "Glad you could make it." "Wouldn't miss it," Brianna replied, donning the reflective vest he handed her. Before the ride began, Eli addressed the crowd, his voice booming over the hum of the engines. "We're not just here to ride," he said. "We're here to remind this family, and this town, that they're not alone. Every mile we ride today is a mile closer to rebuilding their lives. Let's show them what community really means." Cheers erupted from the crowd as the bikers mounted their motorcycles. Brianna climbed into the passenger seat of a truck driven by Maria, who was coordinating logistics for the event. The ride itself was a sight to behold. The long procession of motorcycles, accompanied by support vehicles like Maria's, wound through the streets of the town and into the countryside. Residents lined the roads, waving and cheering as the bikers passed by. Children held handmade signs with messages of thanks, and some even ran alongside the motorcycles for a few yards, their faces glowing with excitement. Brianna couldn't help but smile as she watched the display of unity. This was more than a fundraiser. It was a statement of hope, a reminder of the strength that came from standing together. The community event. When the ride concluded, everyone gathered at a local park for the main event. Tents and booths had been set up, offering everything from barbecue plates to handmade crafts. A live band played upbeat tunes, and the atmosphere was one of celebration and solidarity. Brianna found herself drawn to the family at the center of the event. A young couple with 2 small children. They stood near a donation booth, overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. The mother's eyes glistened with tears as she hugged each person who approached them. Eli nudged Brianna toward the family. "Go introduce yourself," he said. She hesitated, but his encouraging smile pushed her forward. Taking a deep breath, she approached the couple. "Hi, I'm Brianna," she said, her voice gentle. "I just wanted to say I'm so sorry for what you've been through. If there's anything I can do to help, please let me know." The mother, a petite woman with kind eyes, took Brianna's hand and squeezed it. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling. "You already have, just by being here." Their brief exchange left a deep impression on Brianna. She realized that sometimes offering kindness didn't require grand gestures. Just showing up could make all the difference. A heartfelt revelation. As the day wore on, Brianna found herself standing by the stage, watching as Eli prepared to address the crowd. He held a microphone in one hand and the same calm confidence she had seen on the bridge weeks ago. "Today isn't just about raising money," Eli began, his voice carrying across the park. "It's about showing what happens when people come together for something bigger than themselves. Every one of you here is proof that kindness isn't just an idea. It's an action, and it's contagious." He paused, scanning the crowd until his gaze landed on Brianna. "I want to take a moment to recognize someone who's inspired me, and maybe a few others here. Brianna, can you come up here?" Brianna froze, her cheeks flushing as the crowd turned to look at her. Maria gave her a nudge, and she reluctantly made her way to the stage. Eli placed a hand on her shoulder as she joined him. Brianna didn't just receive kindness, she paid it forward. She's been organizing community cleanups, helping her neighbors, and showing that one person can make a difference. That's what the Road Guardians are all about, and she's living proof of it. The crowd erupted into applause, and Brianna felt tears welling in her eyes. She hadn't expected recognition, but hearing Eli's words filled her with a deep sense of purpose. When the applause died down, Eli leaned in and said quietly, "You're one of us now, Brianna. Whether you ride or not, you're part of this family. A legacy of hope." As the event wound down, Brianna sat with Maria and Jasmine, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The park was quieting, but the energy of the day still lingered. "You did good today," Maria said, handing Brianna a bottle of water. "You've got the heart for this." Brianna smiled, feeling a sense of belonging she hadn't realized she'd been missing. "It's not just me," she said. "It's all of us. That's what makes it special." Jasmine nodded. "You're right. And the best part is, it doesn't end here. There's always another road, another person to help. As Brianna drove home that evening, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The broken-down car on the bridge, the bikers she had feared, the kindness she had received. They were all part of a chain reaction that had changed her life. And now she was part of that chain, ready to pass the kindness on to others. When she pulled into her driveway, she looked at the patch sitting on her dashboard. It was more than a keepsake now. It was a reminder of the legacy she was building. With a smile, she whispered to herself, "Every road has its challenges, but no one should face them alone." And with that, Brianna stepped into her home, ready to face whatever roads lay ahead. The night of reflection. Brianna stood in her living room, the house quiet and bathed in the soft glow of a table lamp. The events of the day replayed in her mind: the ride, the family's gratitude, Ila's words on stage. Each moment felt like a thread, weaving together a tapestry of change, not just in her community but within herself. She sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the patch and keychain in front of her. These small items had come to symbolize so much more than a chance encounter on a bridge. They were reminders of the resilience and strength she had discovered within herself. Her phone buzzed with a message from Eli. "You made a difference today, Brianna. Proud of you. Rest up. We'll need your energy for the next one." She smiled, her heart warm with gratitude. But as she set the phone down, she realized something profound. While she had been inspired by the Road Guardians, the changes she was seeing in her life and her community were the result of her own courage and determination. She wasn't just following their example, she was creating her own path. A new road ahead. Over the next few weeks, Brianna's involvement in her community deepened. She organized more cleanup events, helped start a donation drive for local families in need, and even began mentoring young women in her neighborhood, encouraging them to take charge of their futures. Each act, no matter how small, felt like a step forward, a way to continue the chain of kindness that had started on that bridge. Her efforts didn't go unnoticed. Neighbors who had once been distant began to greet her warmly, and the community as a whole seemed more connected, more alive. The park she had helped revitalize became a hub of activity, with children playing and families gathering. It was a living testament to what could be achieved when people came together. Full circle. One afternoon, Brianna received an unexpected visitor. She opened the door to find a young woman standing on her porch, visibly anxious but determined. "Hi," the woman said, clutching the small notebook. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I heard about what you've been doing in the neighborhood. I was wondering if you could help me." Brianna smiled warmly, stepping aside to let her in. "Of course. Come in. Tell me what's on your mind." The woman introduced herself as Alicia, a single mother struggling to balance work and raising her son. She had heard about Brianna's community efforts and hoped to find guidance on how to create a better life for her family. As Alicia spoke, Brianna felt a deep sense of connection. She saw in Alicia a reflection of her own journey, the fear, the uncertainty, but also the strength and determination. Together, they began brainstorming ideas, from budgeting tips to finding community resources. By the end of their conversation, Alicia's face was brighter, her shoulders less burdened. "Thank you," Alicia said as she stood to leave. "I didn't know where else to turn, but you've given me hope." After Alicia left, Brianna sat in quiet reflection. This, she realized, was what it was all about, helping others see the strength they already had within them, just as the Road Guardians had done for her. The legacy lives on. Months passed, and Brianna's life continued to blossom. Her community efforts grew, and she remained an active part of the Road Guardians, joining their outreach events and even helping to plan some of them. She often reflected on the night she had been stranded on the bridge, marveling at how that moment of vulnerability had become the catalyst for so much growth. One evening, as she stood on her porch watching the sunset, a familiar sound reached her ears, the low rumble of motorcycles. She smiled, knowing exactly who it was. Moments later, Eli and a few other guardians pulled up, their bikes gleaming in the fading light. "We were in the area," Eli said, dismounting and grinning. Thought we'd check in on our favorite honorary member. Brianna laughed, stepping forward to greet them. You're always welcome here. As they chatted, the conversation turned to the future. Eli mentioned a new initiative the Guardians were planning, a mentorship program for young adults interested in community service. He looked at Brianna meaningfully. We were thinking you'd be perfect to lead it. Brianna's breath caught. Me? Really? Why not? Eli said. You've already proven you can inspire people and get things done. This would just be the next step. After a moment of thought, Brianna nodded, a smile spreading across her face. I'd be honored. The final ride. The next day, Brianna joined the Guardians for another ride, this time as a full-fledged member. She wore a jacket with their emblem proudly displayed, the patch that had once been a gift now sewn onto the sleeve. As the motorcycles roared to life, she felt a deep sense of belonging. The road stretched out before them, full of possibility, and she knew that wherever it led, she wouldn't be alone. The ride that day was more than a journey. It was a celebration of how far she had come. And as Brianna rode into the horizon with her new family, she carried with her a simple but powerful truth. Kindness, like the open road, has no end.